Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'm bringing you 17 of my favorite DIY handmade ornaments that I've created so far here on my channel. Keep in mind that while you're watching they are numbered a little bit out of order since this is a few of my ornament videos put together. I wanted to give you guys some inspiration to create your own handmade ornaments for your tree this year. Now let's go ahead and get right into today's video. For ornament number 1, I'm making an embroidery hoop orb ornament. For this project, I'm using two 3-inch embroidery hoops, and these ones I picked up from Michael's. And I'm first unscrewing the top screw on the hoops so that I can take them apart. I'm taking both of the hoops apart, but I'm only going to be using one entire hoop and then the inside portion of the second hoop. Once I have them all taken apart, I'm then painting them with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Ivory. I did the outside of all the hoops and then also the inside ring of all of the hoops. Once those were all painted and the paint dried, I then wanted them to look a little bit rustic. So I took my Folk Art chalk paint in the color Java and I dry brushed that color on all 3 of my hoops. Next, I'm putting all of my hoops together. I'm placing what would be normally the 2 inner hoops inside of what's normally the outer embroidery hoop ring, and I'm just spacing those out to where they make an orb shape and then screwing the top screw tight so that it holds everything in place. And then to secure it a little bit more, I'm using a little bit of hot glue on the bottom portion of my orb. To add some detail to my ornament, I'm using this really pretty striped ribbon that I picked up from Dollar General, and I'm making a really simple bow, and then for the tail ends of my bow, I'm just cutting those in a diagonal shape. And because I wanted to add a pop of green to my ornament, I'm using some of this really pretty greenery off of one of these stems that I picked up from Hobby Lobby. I just cut the greenery pieces down small so they'll fit on the top of my ornament, and then I'm hot gluing them right underneath the screw portion of my hoop. Once I had that on, then I just used some hot glue on the back side of my bow and glued that right in the middle of my greenery. Next, I'm creating my hanger for my ornament. I took a long piece of jute and I wrapped it around the top of that screw on my embroidery hoop, and then I just tied that in a knot so that it would stay around that screw, and then just made the pieces of jute long enough to be a hanger to hang on the tree. I could have stopped there, but I decided I wanted to add some different colors of greenery to the top of my ornament. So I'm taking some of these darker ones, also from Hobby Lobby, and just hot gluing those small pieces right above my bow. Once I had those other greenery pieces on, I decided I wanted to add some pine cones. So I'm then adding some of these mini pine cones from Dollar Tree right above my bow as well. And this is my embroidery hoop orb ornament all finished. I think this one turned out really cute. It was super easy to make, and I just love the white ivory color. It really pops against the green on the tree. Now moving into ornament number 2, I'm making a rag wreath ornament. For this one, I'm using some of this burlap fabric that I had left over in my craft stash, and I'm cutting it down into strips that are about 2 inches thick. They don't have to be exactly 2 inches, just as long as you're somewhere around 2 inches. And then once I have those all cut out, I'm then cutting them in half, and then they ended up being about 4 or 5 inches in length, just as long as they are long enough to tie around a hoop. Then I'm also using some of this like burgundy checked fabric, also from Hobby Lobby, and I'm cutting that down. These ones were about 1.5 inches to 2 inches in thickness, and I'm just cutting those in half to be about 4 or 5 inches in length, just like I did with the burlap fabric. Once I had them all cut, I decided to just use this 3-inch embroidery hoop that I had from the last project. I had the outside of the ring still left over, so what better way than to use it for this? And I'm starting by tying all of the fabric that I just cut off around my hoop. I started with the checked fabric and I tied that around my hoop and made a knot and then pressed it up towards the screw. And then I did another piece of the checked fabric. So 2 pieces of the checked fabric tied around the hoop, and then I did a strip of the burlap fabric tied around the hoop. I then continued that same step, rotating between the 2 over and over again until I had my entire embroidery hoop covered with my fabric. My fabric ended up being a little bit longer than I would have liked it to be when it was tied around my hoop, so I just used some scissors and cut those strips of fabric down a little bit and just made it look a little bit more neat. Next, I'm taking these wood beads that spell out the word joy, and I'm stringing them onto a piece of jute. Once I have all 3 letters strung on, I want to make sure that they don't move around and they stay in place. So I'm tying a knot right next to the letter J, and then also another knot right next to the letter Y. I'm then attaching this to the center of my ornament. I flipped my ornament over and I placed hot glue on each side so that the words joy are going across the middle of my ornament. And then I wanted to add some pop of greenery. You guys know I love using little pieces of greenery on almost all of my projects. So I used the lighter green color greenery and then also this darker color, and then I'm just hot gluing those to the very top of my ornament right next to the screw of the embroidery hoop, and to attach them I used hot glue. I'm then adding this metal star, which I believe was from a 4th of July Dollar Tree sign, and I just had it left over in my craft stash. I'm putting hot glue on the back side of it, and then I'm placing that over top of the greenery in the top center. Once I had that on, the very last step was to add a hanger, so I used a double piece of jute, wrapped it around the top screw of that embroidery hoop, and then just made those jute pieces for the length of my hanger. And this is what my rag wreath ornament looks like all finished. What I love about this one is you can use any kinds of fabric that you have left over in your stash to make a really pretty ornament, or if you wanted to do this as a wreath, you also could do that as well. Now ornament number 3, I'm making a Season's Greetings ornament. For this one, I'm using one of these unfinished ornament shaped wood pieces from Michaels. It did come in a pack of 5 and it was only 99 cents for all 5 of them. I started by painting the ornament shape with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Ivory, and I only had to do 1 coat of this paint. Once the paint was all dry, I then decided I wanted to use one of these mini ornaments from this pack of ornaments that I got from Walmart. I'm using this one here that says Season's Greetings, and it had the hole already on one side, but I wanted to add another hole. So I'm just making sure I'm putting my drill right in the same spot as the hole on the other side, and I'm drilling a hole right next to the word Season's Greetings. Then I'm taking some of this burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree and I'm cutting it down to where it will go around my ornament, and then just cutting it down even more to where it will be right behind that little ornament that says Season's Greetings. And then wrapping my cut piece of burlap around the front of my ornament, and then I'm hot gluing the 2 ends of that along the back side using some hot glue. Next, I'm adding some of these mini Christmas bells from Dollar Tree. I'm only going to be using 2 of them. I'm taking 1 bell and stringing it on a small piece of jute, and then I'm running that piece of jute through one of the holes on my little Season's Greeting ornament, and then tying a knot around the side of it so that the bell stays in place. I'm then taking another one of those bells and stringing it onto a second piece of jute. I'm then taking that jute, putting it through the other hole on the other side of my Season's Greeting little ornament, and then doing another knot on that side. I'm then hot gluing that Season's Greetings ornament right over top of my burlap in the center of my ornament, and then hot gluing the 2 ends of the jute along the back side. This ornament did not have a hole in the top of it, so I'm using my drill to drill a hole in the very top of my ornament so that I can string a piece of jute through that to make my hanger. I'm using a piece of jute and just tying a knot for the length that I want my hanger to be. Then to add some detail to the front of my ornament, I'm using some of these dark greenery pieces. I'm cutting them down so that they'll fit better onto my ornament, and then I'm using some hot glue to attach them on the top and the bottom of my ornament. And this is my Season's Greetings ornament all finished. Super easy to do, very minimal, and I think this goes perfect with my farmhouse rustic theme that I have for this year. Moving on into ornament number 4, I'm making a mini bucket ornament. For this one, I'm using one of these mini white buckets. These can be found in like the wedding section at Dollar Tree, and they come in a 2-pack. And I'm also using some of these wood stems from Dollar Tree. I'm starting by placing some of the wood stems into the bucket. I just kind of wanted to get a feel for which shaped stems that I wanted to use in my bucket. So when I got them all figured out and how I wanted to have them placed, I started hot gluing them all together in the inside of my bucket. Then I'm adding some greenery pieces around all of those wood stems in the inside of my bucket. To attach them, I just place hot glue on the bottom of the stems and then press them down onto the wood stems. I'm also using some darker greenery pieces and doing the same thing, just hot gluing those down around my wood stems. I really like having the two different colors of greenery. I think it just makes it pop so much more. And then to add a pop of color, I'm using some of these berries. I just cut them down a little bit and then hot glued them to the inside of my bucket. To add some detail to the outside of my bucket, I thought it would be really pretty to add some of this ribbon from Dollar General. I've been using this ribbon a lot. I think it is perfect for farmhouse decor. I just cut that ribbon down to size to fit around my bucket and then hot glued the two ends together. And for the very last step, I'm using a doubled piece of jute to wrap around the top handle of the bucket and then making a hanger out of my jute. This is my mini bucket ornament all finished and placed on my tree. This was super simple to make, only took a few minutes, and this one screams farmhouse to me. For ornament number 5, I'm making a wood slice ornament. And for this one, I picked up a pack of wood slices at Hobby Lobby, and I'm only going to be showing you how to do one of them, so I'm just using one wood slice for this one. I'm starting by painting the inside portion of the wood slice with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Ivory. And then for around the edges, I used a smaller brush just so I could have more precise lines. Once the paint was all dry, I'm then going to be using my stamps, and I'm using all capital letters, and I'm doing the word Noel. And I actually heard from some of the subscribers in my last video where I did stamps to start from the end of the word and work your way like towards the beginning of the word. So I gave that a try, and I did really like how it turned out. So thank you for everyone who suggested that. Then to make a hole in my ornament, I'm using my drill to drill a hole in the very top center so that I can have placement for a hanger. Then for my hanger, I'm taking a piece of jute and I'm stringing it through that hole that I just drilled, and then I'm tying a knot at the very top of my wood slice. I'm then adding a large wood bead to that piece of jute, and then I'm taking that bead and I'm pushing it all the way down right next to that knot. Then tying a knot at the very top of my wood bead to hold it into place, and then just making my jute pieces for my hanger the length that I want. To add a little bit of detail to this ornament and add a pop of color, I'm using some of this red and black checked ribbon from Dollar Tree, and I'm just making a really simple bow out of the ribbon. And then for the ends of the ribbon, I did cut them in a diagonal shape, and then I'm hot gluing that ribbon right over top of my wood bead. And this is the wood slice ornament all finished. With this, you can make so many different ones with different words and different colored ribbon to go with whatever theme that you have in your home for Christmas. For ornament number 6, I'm making a embroidery hoop trees ornament. For this one, I'm using a 3-inch embroidery hoop from Michaels, and I'm first starting by taking the embroidery hoop apart. I'm then using some of these mini trees that I picked up from Dollar Tree. I'm just seeing where I want to place them, and then once I have that figured out, I'm hot gluing the very base of the trees on the inside of the inner ring of my embroidery hoop. Next, I'm taking some of this ribbon, once again from Dollar General. You guys will see me use this a lot. I'm cutting that down to where I can have it looped around the very top portion of my embroidery hoop above my trees. And then I'm putting my 2 embroidery hoops together, pulling that ribbon really tight, and then screwing the screw on the top of the embroidery hoop very tight so that my ribbon stays into place. I then flipped over my ornament and I'm cutting off those extra long pieces of ribbon so that it looks nice and neat. Next, I'm taking some of these wood beads that spell out the word snow and I'm stringing them onto a piece of jute. I'm going to have this word going across the ribbon on the top of my ornament. And to hold the word snow into place on my piece of jute, I'm tying a knot around the letter S, and then I'm tying a knot right at the end of the letter W. Once I have that all in placement, and then I'm actually taking my embroidery hoop apart. I wish I would have attached my little jute pieces on top of my ribbon earlier before I put my ribbon in, but I didn't think about it then, so I'm doing it now. So I just had to take it apart and then re-put it back together with my pieces of jute going through the hoop. Then for my hanger, I'm adding a double piece of jute and I'm stringing it through that top screw on top of the embroidery hoop and then just making my hanger for the length that I want it to be. Here is my embroidery hoop trees ornament all finished. Again, super easy, and I've been using a lot of these 3-inch embroidery hoops for ornaments this year. They are the perfect size and you can really do so much with them. For ornament number 7, I'm making a wood blocks ornament. The wood blocks that I'm using are the Tumbling Tower game blocks from Dollar Tree. I'm using 5 of them for this project and I'm painting them with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Ivory, and I only did 1 coat of paint on each one of my blocks. I'm then using hot glue to attach all of the blocks together. I'm doing 3 of them going in one direction and then I'm using 1 in the opposite direction on each side. Next, I'm making a mini wreath to go right in the center of all of my blocks. To make it, I'm using some of this green trim, and I picked this up at Hobby Lobby over where you would get all of your ribbon. So once I have my little wreath formed, I'm then using some of this berry garland from Dollar Tree, and I'm wrapping this around my entire wreath. As you'll see here in a minute, I ended up not really liking the berries on it. I thought maybe they were too big for this mini wreath, but I did really like the contrast of like the brown twine wrapped around the wreath. So I ended up just cutting off all of the berries and leaving that twine around the wreath. In this project, I'm also using one of these unfinished wooden stars. These stars did come in a pack of stars and I picked them up at Hobby Lobby. I'm painting mine with my Folk Art chalk paint in the color Tuscan Red. Once the paint completely dried, I then placed hot glue on the back of it and then glued it right in the center of all of my wood blocks. Then I'm going to be adding my wreath. So I'm putting hot glue on the back side of my wreath and then just placing that in the center of my wood blocks going around my star. Then to add some embellishments on the sides of my ornament, I'm using some of these brass colored push pins, also from Hobby Lobby. And since the wood on these tumbling game block pieces are really soft, I'm able to just push the push pins in with my fingers and I didn't have to hammer them in. So I did 3 of them on each side. Once I had those all pressed in, then I'm using the jute to create my hanger. I just cut it to the size that I wanted, did 2 knots on each end of the jute, and then hot glued those sides or those ends on the back side of my ornament. Here is my wood blocks ornament all finished. This one was super easy to do, just like all of the other ornaments in today's video. And I really love the different elements on this ornament. You have the greenery, the pop of red, and that brass really brings everything together. And now for the 8th and final ornament today, I'm making a wooden beads ornament. I'm first starting by using these wooden beads that I picked up from Hobby Lobby. These did come in a pack with a bunch of different sizes. Then I'm taking a piece of jute and I'm stringing 2 of the smaller beads onto the piece of jute, and the 2 beads are the same size. Then I'm stringing a bead that's a little bit larger than the smaller 2 onto that same piece of jute. Then I'm taking an even larger bead and stringing that onto the same piece of jute. Then I'm just going to taper the beads down, going from a little bit smaller than the middle bead and then doing the 2 smallest beads after that. Once I have the beads on, I really didn't like how long it was, so I took a bead off of each end of my piece of jute. Then to keep the beads all in one place and not have them moving around, I just tied off the jute with a knot on each end of my beads. To create my hanger for this ornament, using that same piece of jute, I just looped it around and then tied off a knot so that I have a loop so I can hang it on my tree. I did want to add a little bit of a pop of color to this ornament. I know I've seen a lot of these wood bead ornaments just like this with no bows, but I like color. So I'm using this Dollar Tree ribbon and I'm making a really simple bow. And then I'm just using some hot glue to attach the bow to the very top bead on my ornament. And this is my wood bead ornament all finished. Probably the easiest ornament in today's video. I've seen tons of these wooden bead ornaments everywhere pretty much. They are so simple and inexpensive to make and goes great with farmhouse decor. The first ornaments I'll be showing you today are these two mason jar lid ornaments, and to create these I used mason jar lids, red and black buffalo check fabric, burlap fabric, deco art chalk paint in the color lace, folk art acrylic paint in Old Ivy, folk art chalk paint in Java, paintbrushes, my hot glue gun, jute, wooden snowflake and tree stickers from Dollar Tree, and Rust-Oleum spray paint in oil rubbed bronzed. I'm starting out by painting all of my mason jar lids with this Rust-Oleum spray paint in oil rubbed bronze. I'm then taking out the inner circle of my lid and I'm using that to measure out my fabric. I need the fabric large enough that I can wrap it around this circle, and I'm cutting that into a square. Once I have all of my fabric cut, I'm then going to be taking the inner circle once again and placing it face down on my cut squares. I'm then placing some hot glue on the back of the circle and then simply just putting the fabric on top of the glue to attach it to the circle. I'm continuing this step until my circle is entirely covered in fabric. Next, I'm making the hanger for my ornament. I'm taking a piece of jute and looping it through the outer ring of my jar lid and then tying the ends off in a knot. Now I'm placing some hot glue on the inside edge of my ring and then taking my fabric covered circle and placing it right inside on top of the glue. Next, I'm painting this wooden snowflake sticker from Dollar Tree with my chalk paint in the color lace. I only did one coat of this paint, and once it was all dry, I put some hot glue right on the back of it and then just simply placed it right in the center of my ornament. Now I'm making a small bow out of some jute and then cutting off the long ends. For the last step on this ornament, I'm attaching the small jute bow using some hot glue right at the top of my ornament. And this is the ornament all finished. Next, I'm going to be showing you another version of the mason jar ornament. For this one, I'm using burlap fabric and I'm measuring it out the same as I did the last one. I'm cutting a small square large enough that I can wrap the fabric around the inner circle of my jar lid. And to attach it, I'm using some hot glue right on the back of the lid and then folding the fabric over top and onto the glue. Once I have my circle all covered in fabric, I'm then taking a piece of jute and looping it through the outer ring of my lid and tying off a knot and cutting off any of the long jute end pieces. This is going to be the hanger for my ornament. Next, I'm placing some hot glue on the inside edge of my ring and then putting my fabric covered circle on top of that. I'm painting my wooden tree with my acrylic paint in the color Old Ivy, and for the trunk of my tree, I'm painting that in my folk art chalk paint in the color Java. And for the appearance of snow on my tree, I'm dry brushing my chalk paint in the color Lace right over top of my tree. Next, I'm placing some hot glue on the back of the wooden tree and placing it right in the center of my ornament. For the last step, I'm making a small bow out of some jute and then attaching it at the very top of my ornament using some hot glue. And this is what the ornament looks like all finished. Next up, I'll be showing you a few different versions of these rustic wood sliced ornaments using a stamp and some paint. The materials I used to make these were a pack of wood slices from Hobby Lobby, Waverly chalk paint in the color Ink, Deco Art chalk paint in the color Lace, paintbrushes, jute, mini bells from Dollar Tree, red and black checked ribbon from Dollar General, my hot glue gun, black and white paint markers, and a stamp and stamp pad from the Target Dollar Spot. To To start out, I'm taking off all of the jute strands that are attached to my wood slices so that I'm able to paint them. I'm then painting 2 of the wood slices with my Deco Art chalk paint in the color Lace, and I'm using a smaller brush to do this so that I can have a precise line around all of the edges. Then I'm painting 2 of the wood slices with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Ink, and I'm doing the same thing as I did with the other ones, using a small brush so that I can have precise lines around all of the edges. Once my paint has completely dried, I'm then using my white paint marker to write the words Merry and Joy on my 2 slices, and I did do some little dots at the ends of all of my letters. And for one of the white wood slices, I wrote the word Noel using my black paint pen. Next, I'm cutting a small piece of this red and black checked ribbon, and I'm folding it up and taking a piece of jute and tying it right around the middle to make a bow. I'm then taking another piece of jute and making a small bow. I'm restringing my ornament with some jute in the pre-made hole and then tying off the ends and cutting off any of the long jute pieces. I'm using some hot glue right in the center above my word Noel to attach my red and black checked bow, and then attaching the jute bow in the center of the red and black bow. And here I'm doing the same steps as I did for the Noel ornament. I'm rolling up a small piece of the buffalo check ribbon, making a small jute bow to attach on top of the checked ribbon, attaching those on the very top of my ornament, and then restringing a piece of jute through the pre-drilled hole. And for my last white wood slice, I'm using my Stamp and Stamp pad from the Target Dollar Spot. I'm pressing the stamp into the red ink, and then I'm just simply putting that right in the center of my white wood slice. I'm making sure to press down as hard as I can so I can have the best color payoff. Next, I'm putting 2 of these little mini bells from Dollar Tree that I've already spray painted with the Rust-Oleum spray paint onto a piece of jute, and then putting the jute through the pre-drilled hole on the ornament. And then I'm just tying off the end of the jute and cutting off the end pieces for the hanger of my ornament. And this is what the wood slice ornaments look like all finished. These were probably the easiest out of all of them to do, and probably my favorite as well. Next, I'll be showing you a few different versions of fabric ball ornaments. I'll be showing you a red and buffalo check one, a Christmas fabric covered one, and also a burlap fabric covered one. To make these ornaments, I used foam balls from Hobby Lobby, red and black checked fabric from Hobby Lobby, Merry Christmas fabric from Hobby Lobby, and also burlap fabric from Hobby Lobby. My hot glue gun, jute, berry garland from Dollar Tree, Christmas picks from Walmart, small pine cones from Dollar General, Christmas picks from Dollar Tree, mini bells from Dollar Tree, and Rust-Oleum spray paint in oil rubbed bronze. To start this project, I once again just spray painted some of these mini bells from Dollar Tree with my Rust-Oleum spray paint. I'm then measuring out all of my fabric that I'll be using today. I'm cutting them into 10 by 10 inch squares. I'm cutting all of my fabric in the 10 by 10 inch squares so that they will completely cover over top of all of my 3-inch foam balls. If you want to have more fabric on the very top of your ball ornaments, then you probably want to cut them at like 11 by 11, but I wanted to make sure that I had enough fabric for future projects as well. Next, I'm going to be creating the hanger for my ornament. I'm placing some hot glue in the center of my foam ball with the jute over top of that to attach it, flipping my ball to the other side, and then just placing some more hot glue down with the jute over top of that to fully attach the jute around the ball, then just tying off the end of the jute in a knot to create my hanger. Next, I'm placing my ball in the center of my 10 by 10 inch square, and for this one I'm using my red and black checked fabric, and I'm gathering the fabric up to the very top of my ball, and I'm getting the fabric as tight as I possibly can, and I'm leaving out that jute hanger at the top. Once I have it gathered like I want it, I'm then taking a piece of jute and tying it around the fabric at the very top of the ball. Now I'm wrapping some jute around the bottom of my ball and attaching the 2 sides of the jute at the very top by the gathered fabric using some hot glue. I'm adding a second piece of jute around the other side of the ball the same way I did the first one, wrapping it around the bottom of the ball and attaching the sides of the jute at the very top by the gathered fabric with some hot glue, and then cutting off the long ends of the jute. Next, I'm cutting a strip of burlap that's about 1.5 inches thick, and I'm wrapping the burlap around the very top of my ornament where I have the gathered fabric, and then using a little bit of hot glue to attach that down. I wanted to add some berries to the top of my ornament, so here I'm just cutting the berries off of these from the Dollar Tree picks and then just hot gluing them on the very top of my ornament. And for the last step, I'm adding one small pine cone right next to those berries using some hot glue. And this is what the buffalo check one looks like all finished. Next, I'm going to be showing you how I created the burlap ornament. I'm starting by making my hanger, once again, placing some hot glue right in the center of my foam ball with the jute over top of that to attach it, wrapping the jute around the ball and then tying it off and adding a little bit of hot glue with the jute over top to fully attach the jute around the ball. Then just tying off the ends of the jute at the very top to make a full hanger and cutting off the loose ends. Next, I'm placing my ball in the center of my 10 by 10 inch square of burlap and then pulling the burlap up over and around the ball. I'm trying to get it as tight as I possibly can before I take a piece of jute and tie it around the very top to gather all of my fabric and then cutting off any loose ends of jute. Now I'm wrapping some of this berry garland that I picked up from Dollar Tree about 3 times around the very top of my ornament and then cutting it off with some scissors. I really love the leaves on this Christmas pick from Walmart, so I'm cutting a few of these off and hot gluing them right at the top of my ornament. And this is how the burlap ball ornament turned out. I have one more ornament to show you guys today, and it is this Merry Christmas fabric ball ornament. I'm doing everything the same as I did with the last 2 fabric ornaments. I'm just using different fabric, and it is still the 10 by 10 inch square. I pulled it up around the ball, tied it really tight with the jute to gather all of the fabric. This time I'm cutting about 1.5 inches to 2 inch thick piece of burlap, and I'm wrapping it around the top of the ornament by the gathered fabric and then using some hot glue to attach that burlap down. I'm then stringing 2 of these mini Christmas bells that I got from Dollar Tree that I've already spray painted with that Rust-Oleum spray paint, and I'm tying those around my burlap fabric. And for the last step, I'm hot gluing some of these berries from my Dollar Tree Christmas picks right at the top by my bells. And this is the finished Christmas fabric ball ornament. The first DIY for today are these mini wooden ornaments, and to make these I used the Tumbling Tower game from Dollar Tree, Waverly chalk paint in the color ink, Americana chalk paint in the color lace, Folk Art chalk paint in the color Java and also in the color Castle, paintbrushes, jute, buffalo check ribbon from Hobby Lobby, my hot glue gun, scissors, a white paint pen, Rust-Oleum spray paint in oil rubbed bronze, Christmas bells from Dollar Tree, and a drill. To start out, I'm taking my spray paint in the oil rubbed bronze color and I'm spray painting some of the Christmas bells from Dollar Tree. I did end up only using 3 of the bells, but I now have them already painted for future projects. Now I'm taking 3 of the wooden pieces from the Towering game and I'm painting them in the Waverly chalk paint in the color ink. Then I'm taking 3 more of the wooden pieces and I'm painting these ones in my chalk paint in the color lace, and I did only have to do 1 coat of each color paint. Once my paint has dried, I'm then taking the color lace and I'm dry brushing that over all of the blocks that were painted in the ink color just to give them a more distressed rustic look. I'm then dry brushing the color Java over top of all of the wooden pieces that are painted in the lace color. I wanted these ones to look rustic as well. Once all of my pieces are done being dry brushed, on all of the black colored ones, I'm taking my white paint pen and writing words associated with Christmas, and today I did the words joy, love, and also the word peace. And on the lace painted pieces, I used a black Sharpie to write the words Santa, Noel, and Mary. And now I'm using my drill to make a small hole in the ends of all of my wooden pieces. I'm just using a scrap piece of wood underneath all of my pieces when I'm drilling so that I don't mess up my table that's underneath. Once I have all of my holes drilled in my wooden pieces, on all of the ink painted ones, I'm taking a piece of jute, putting it through the hole that I just made, and then tying a knot off on the end. Then I'm cutting 3 different pieces of buffalo check ribbon and I'm making a knot in the center of all 3 of them. Now I'm going to be attaching the buffalo check ribbon to the very top of all of my ink painted pieces. To attach it, I'm just placing a little bit of hot glue right over the jute on top of the wooden piece and then putting the ribbon right over top of that and then cutting off any of the long end pieces. And now for the lace painted pieces, I'm taking a piece of jute and putting it through the hole that I had drilled. And for this one, I'm going to be putting one of those Christmas bells that I spray painted right on the very top. So I'm just stringing it through the jute and then I'm tying a knot at the end of my jute. And that is the last step for these mini wooden Christmas ornaments. I love how they turned out and they work perfect on any mini Christmas tree. And that was it for today's DIY handmade ornaments. I really hope I was able to give you inspiration to create your own homemade ornaments this year. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, I hope that you will consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching.